and how the PL SQL is used in Informatica projects. And we have seen how to write the procedures for dropping the index and creating the index, and at the same time, we have also seen how to actually analyze the tables and everything. So that's what we all also checked it. And let's try to now understand how this will, how can we actually invoke the PLSQL stored procedures from Informatica. So basically today I'll concentrate on how the stored procedure transformation works. How would we how the stored procedure transformation works, and how can we actually invoke the stored procedure. See, basically, whenever you have a PLSQL procedures, or whether it is a Oracle procedure or a DB2 procedure or an Informix or any other type of a procedure, basically using the stored procedure transformation, you can actually invoke that from Informatica. So what we do here is invoke that from the Informatica part. So we can invoke the DB2 procedures, MS SQL Server, Teradata, as well as all these kind of a procedures we can invoke. So in this example, I'll show you how to invoke the PLSQL procedures by using a stored procedure transformation. So just like a lookup, this also can be configured in both the modes. One is connected mode and another is a unconnected mode, which it is there. Connected mode and unconnected mode, which you have. So we'll see both of them, how a connected mode works and how an unconnected mode works using this. Now currently I'll first show about how to call how can I actually drop the indexes from the stored procedure by using a stored procedure transformation. Before you start with it, the first thing is that you have to do is you need to have that procedure uh, executed, or it should be available in your target schema. So I already shared with you about what are all the procedures that we have actually prepared as part of last time. So when you see this is a drop indexes. So basically this drop indexes procedure, it's actually taking a table name and error message, and it is querying the indexes which are it is querying the indexes on the table name, and it is dropping all the indexes. So make sure that you have the drop indexes procedure which is already present in this. Uh, I mean, like basically, this is already present to do that. Now, let me try to define the mapping for it now. So I'm making sure that my procedure is already present. My procedure is already present here, and I'm just going to pass the table name, and then I'll get the error message in case if the stored procedure returns an error. So let me just get started with it. We are making sure that you have to make sure that the procedure is in the compiled status. And if it is a packaged procedure, all you need to do is just use the package name. These are all like a public procedures. This drop indexes procedure is also a part of this one package. I'll try to invoke the procedure from here as well. So let me just start with a mapping here. So in this mapping, we are going to understand two things. So one is that how to call a how to use the stored procedure transformation. This is basically the passive transformation, and the second one, I'm going to introduce you how to define the parameter file and how to define the parameters in a parameter file. How will you do that? So let's say parameters, we checked it. I mean, if you remember the lab which we have done for unconnected lookup, we actually defined the mapping parameters and we have initialized them. But now I'll show you how can you pass the parameters dynamically at the runtime. So basically, I'm going to define a procedure parameter for a $$ table name, and this table name I'm going to pass it dynamically before I invoke the stored procedure. So I have to pass the table name as an input to my stored procedure. So I'm going to parameterize that and then use it. So how this will work now, let's try to understand. See, basically what I'm going to do is, let me just go here. See, the procedures like dropping the index, creating the index, and analyzing the tables, truncating the partitions, these are like a reusable procedures. And reusable procedures, which in the sense, basically, all right, I don't know why. Okay, so these are all like a reusable components. So what we can do is whichever is actually a reusable component in the real time, we actually develop them in the shared folders. Okay, so reusable components and all, we'll actually keep them in the shared folder, and from the shared folder we start reusing them. So let me log into this. So here also I'm going to define these procedures in the shared folder so that it can be used by anyone. So but for now, when you are practicing it, I request you to do it in your individual folder, because here if you see there is a folder called as a ODS underscore sales. This ODS underscore sales folder is a shared one. So if you remember in the beginning of the class, we did understand that how to create a shared folder and how to create a normal folder. And you can easily find out the difference between the this folder and this folder. It's basically this one is a shared folder and this one is a normal folder what you have. So let me just define all of them here. Anyway, if you try to define here, you'll not have a privilege to this folder. Since because I joined as an administrator, this folder, I can create whatever I want. Now, basically, I'm creating um, mappings for dropping the indexes and creating the indexes in the ODS sales folder. And will be this can be reused. So now what is the input that you're going to pass? See, your stored procedure is actually taking a table name as an input, and what input you pass to this. So what input you use and what output you'll get from the stored procedure. From the stored procedure will return me the error message, and I'll actually pass that error message to the file. So I'll create some dummy output file uh, or error output file. So whatever the error that you get, that will be captured into that. Another thing is input. I'm going to create a dummy input. See, basically I don't have any table which actually gives me the table name as an input, and so that I can pass it. So that is the reason I'm going to define one dummy input and one error message output. So this is going to be the Oracle table. I'll just create some dummy Oracle table. And this one, I'm going to actually use the error message as an output. So now I need to define that. So for defining a dummy input, see, you don't have a dummy input table, right? So I'll just create that manually. Go to sources and click on create. Let's say you're creating the dummy input, this one. So the database type is, I'll actually keep this as an uh, Oracle, and then click on create. All I need is from this table, how many inputs I want is, I just need only one column that is a table name. Okay, so here I'll define the column as a table name, and it is going to be the varchar2 of 100. So you'll just assign that and click on OK. Now you have a dummy input as a table name. So this input, I'm going to pass it to the stored procedure. Similarly, I need a one output file which will capture the error message, that I'll create it as a flat file. So this, I'm defining another one error message, and then so just keep it as a flat file. I need to have only one column for this also. Whenever I find an error from the stored procedure, basically I'm going to reuse this one. So error message. So just apply the change and click on OK. So now you have the all the things which are I have an input and I have an output which it is there. All now I need to define is, I need to define the stored procedure, this one mapping, to invoke that. So how to create a mapping? Go to the mapping tab, click on create, and then enter m underscore sp, let's say drop indexes. So this is a stored procedure for dropping the indexes. So I'm just using this. So click on OK. Okay, so it says that the mapping is already existing. So now I'll just call it as maybe drop indexes reusable. So I'll just define it like this, reusable. So click on OK. Now you need to have a source, right? So just pull the source, whatever you have defined here. So it's going to be the dummy source which I have actually defined. So that is my dummy input. So just drag and drop this dummy input to the workspace. What does it contain? It contains the table name as an input. So this table name, I'll pass it to the procedure and then do it. So how to create a stored procedure transformation? It's pretty simple. So go to the transformation tab. You can just you can just use the option import procedure, or otherwise you can actually create it and enter the select the stored procedure and enter the name of the stored procedure. Just a stored procedure transformation name, which I call it as stored procedure underscore drop indexes. So click on create. It will ask you to choose which database your procedure is available. So my procedure is actually available in the the target schema. My target schema I already compiled. So enter the username and password. Enter the username and password and connect to it. So click on this and then the procedures. Let's say your drop indexes procedure is there, and if you see, there is a procedures which have come from the package as well. It has given you the procedures which are part of the package. Let's say I want to use a procedure as part of a package. So just select it and then click on OK. Now, when you actually import a stored procedure, you can easily determine what input you are actually passing and what output you're getting. So if you look at the stored procedure, it is actually taking a table name as an input and it is giving me the error message. So when you edit it, let's say you have the uh, properties tab here, you can understand what procedure it is invoking and all. I'll come back to this, how the stored procedure is invoked. Now pass the table name from this and then use it. Now see, my requirement is that I'm passing the table name. It is dropping the indexes. It is good for me. But now in case if my procedure returns an error saying that while dropping an index, it has returned an error saying that okay, cannot drop the index, or some kind of an error message it has thrown me. So what should I do now? Whenever stored procedure returns an error, I want this Informatica integration service to fail the session, or it has to stop the my session. It should not run it. It should not basically run, and it should fail that. So how can I actually make sure that it should fail the session? So what we can do is, there is a functions, two functions which are there in our Informatica, called as error and abort. So if you use an error function and then write any message, that message will be printed as part of your session log. If you use an error function and then do it. If you use an abort function, it basically aborts the error, it basically aborts the session and then it'll stop your session. So how would it happen? Now let's try to do that. So here I'm going to use one uh, let's say expression transformation, so which I call it as expression underscore error message or something. So now what my requirement is that whenever the error message is not null, that means there is some error which happened in my stored procedure. So this is my error message. So I'll actually define this as an input, and I'll define another port called as an output port called as a error message, and this is also, I'll define it as a string of 4000 which I have, and this is going to be an output port. So expression which it is going to be is, if let's say you have it as whenever my error message is not null, then I have to stop that. So let me show you the function which we are going to use here. So this is an error function, causes the current row to be skipped and the error message will be printed as part of the session log. Whatever the message that you give, it will be printed. And there is another function called as an abort also. So if you use this one, causes a fatal error to be triggered, error message will be printed as part of a error message. Fatal error means it will just stop it, it will abort your session. So now let me try to use it. If is null of error message, so basically if the error message is null, that means there is no error in the stored procedure. If error message is having some value, that means it is there is some error, then now I'm using the error function. Basically I just want to print that error message as part of my session log. So I'm just writing the message as stored procedure has returned an error, and then concatenate it and then use error message using this. So the stored procedure has returned an error now, and then use this error message and then print it as part of this. Now what if in case else means if it is not null, if it is null, I'll just write the error message to this. Now what will happen whenever your stored procedure returns an error, this error message, whatever the stored procedure returns, that error message will be part of the session log. If somebody is actually debugging it in the production environment or something, whenever it fails, you can basically understand what error the stored procedure has written, and based on that you can take the action. So just validate it and click on OK. Now just pass that error message in case if it returns any output. So just pass that error message to this and then close this. So this is what is more about your um, stored procedure transformation. Now very important thing is, let's say you have defined the source as a dummy table input. Do you have dummy input table, Oracle table in your source or a target? No, it is not there. So if I actually go here and then understand what kind of a query it will generate, if I use a generate SQL, what it is generating, it is actually generating a query called as select star from this whatever source or a target. You don't have this kind of a table. So basically when you try to execute, obviously when your Informatica queries the table like this, it will throw the error saying that table or view does not exist. Now what can I do without my, I mean, obviously if I create a session and then run it, it will throw the error because it will try to query the table name something like this. So now how can I do that to avoid the error? So I think all of you might be knowing about the dual table, what is there in Oracle. So dual is like a echo table, or you can call it just a dummy table which is there. Whenever you pass some input, it will actually print that input as part of it. So now what I do is, instead of a dummy input here, I'll replace by the dual. So dual, and here instead of a dummy input dot table name, I'll just hard code my table name. So let's say if I want to pass the fact sales, I'll just pass the fact sales as an input. So when I execute this query, what it gives me, it'll just give me the same fact sales as output back to me. So this kind of a query, I will use it. See, as long as you have a correct amount of columns, as long as your query is valid, you can write any query in the source qualifier. So I can have n number of columns here. See, we are actually trying to build a reusable component, which means it can be used by anyone for any purpose. So we are actually trying to build a reusable component. If I actually hard code the hard code the table name, what will happen? Every time I have to go and modify my query if I'm using for a different table. So I don't want to create a hard coded value. Rather, I want to actually pass this table name at the runtime using any parameter file. So how can I do that? So there is a, to pass the values dynamically, you need to actually define the parameters. So when you go to mappings, parameters and variables, so we know that how to define a parameter. And here I'm going to define a parameter as $$ table name or tab name, anything is fine. So tab name, and this is going to be the parameter, and the data type is going to be string, let's say 100, so which is your precision, and the parameter file which you have, and just click on OK. Now I have defined the parameter. So if you remember, I'll again show you. I just defined the parameter here. So here in my query, instead of actually passing the table name as a hard-coded value, I'll actually pass a parameter value here. So whatever the $$ tab name you have, that I'll pass it. So this value we have not initialized. If you remember, I have not initialized just like a previous example. I have not initialized here. I'm going to pass that value at the runtime. Now you define it. Now my stored procedure is fine. What I'm doing, I'm passing the table name as a parameter to this. Okay, I defined the mapping parameter. So this is called as a mapping parameter. So let's define the session for it. Okay, so how to define the session? So I'm using a wizard to generate it. Use a generate workflow option. Let's say I would like to generate only the session. So that is your reusable session. So click on next. Let's say this is dual table can be accessed from anywhere. You can access from SDBU schema, TDBU schema, anything you can give it. So I'm just giving as a OLTP source. Click on next and then finish it. Now I've actually defined only session for it. I didn't define a workflow basically. So let me open the workflow manager. What we have done is, so this type of a procedure, what we have defined is called as a connected stored procedure. Why it is called as a connected stored procedure transformation is because it is connected to your source qualifier and the expression. So you can also configure that in the unconnected stored procedure. I'll show you how it can be done using an unconnected. Okay, so now let me go here and you have the sessions. Okay, so every session is uh, so now see basically what I'll do is, okay, anyhow we have actually generated a session. Anyhow, I'll show you the different way of using it. Now I have actually developed my mapping in the ODS underscore sales folder. So there is in Informatica there is a feature called as, in order to make the mapping as reusable, you need to actually use a shortcut feature. There is a feature called as a shortcut. Okay, what you can do is you can actually copy the instance of your mapping source, anything. I mean, you can actually copy the instance of your sources, targets, or a mapping to your particular folder, and then you can create the sessions in that folder itself. Okay, now what I'll do is, this is my folder, ODS underscore sales folder. Now I would like to create a shortcut into my working folder. See, basically my working folder is this: April 2015 9:30 p.m. EST. So this is what you have. Now what I do is, basically I need to create a shortcut. So how do you create a shortcut? Shortcut is a feature in Informatica mapping object level, which will allow you to reuse the object. Okay, now I have defined in the shade folder. Do remember, you can create a shortcuts for the objects only which are present in the shade folder. Suppose if I'm defining a folder in this folder, I mean if I am defining a mapping in this folder, basically I cannot create a shortcut. It's all the non-reusable components. Even here also, whatever the mapping so far we have developed, this is like a non-reusable. It cannot be reused by the other user or in any other folder. I cannot use it. So if I develop only the part of ODS sales, then only I can actually shade folder, basically I can reuse it. Now let me try to create a shortcut. So how would I create a shortcut? Whenever you are creating a shortcut, always you have to keep this folder as a active in the sense this is a working folder. So it should be in the bold letters. It should be in your drop down. You should see this folder in your drop down. That means that is your working folder. Now creating a shortcut is pretty simple. Okay, so just I'll go to this folder. Don't make this folder as active. Don't make this folder as active. Still your working folder is that. Now I want to just create a shortcut for this. Just drag and drop. So when you drag and drop, you're actually creating a shortcut from your shade folder to the whatever your working folder. So just click on yes. It will create a shortcut now. Now go back to your working folder and then see here. This is your shortcut to that mapping. So this is a shortcut to my mapping. Is my shortcut is editable? No. You cannot modify this. So once you create a shortcut, it is just an instance to your original object. That's it. You cannot modify it. You cannot do anything. Then what should I do? In case if you want to change it, you should definitely go back to your original object and then modify it so that it will reflect everywhere wherever it is used. It will reflect in every place wherever it is used. So this is how you can create a shortcut. Now, definitely, this is one way. And shortcut is actually possible. Is a shortcut is possible only for a mapping? No. You can create a shortcut for a sources. You can create a shortcut for a target definition. You can create a shortcut for a maplet, and you can create a shortcut for a mapping, and you can create a shortcut for a reusable transformations. Is a shortcut possible for a sessions? No. Is a shortcut possible for a worklet workflow? No. Shortcut feature is available only in the designer objects level. So you can create only at the designer level. So let me generate a workflow for this quickly. So for dropping the indexes, so generate the workflow. I would like to go with workflow with a reusable session. Let's say, let me assign the work source connection and then pass this one. Let's say this one, let me just call this as W underscore SP drop indexes, which it is there. So just click on next. And I don't want to keep this as a reusable one. So just drop indexes and even the session. Okay, let it be session and click on finish. Now I've defined it. So to refresh the metadata, I need to refresh the folder as well. So I'm actually opening this. So now it will refresh the metadata. So you'll see the procedure sp underscore drop indexes. See, basically, if you remember, you're actually passing the table name as an input, and that table name you're passing dynamically, right? So how can I pass the table name dynamically? That is through the parameter file. So whenever you want to pass any input, you need to first define the parameter file and then pass that parameter file as an input to this. So parameter file, basically you can define at multiple levels. For a time being, you understand that it's always a good practice to define the parameter file at the session level. Means for each session we'll make one entry. For each session we'll make one entry. So to define the parameter file now at the session level, you need to have the session name. All right. So there is some issue. Let's go here. First save this. I forgot to save this. That's the reason it is throwing this kind of an error. And let me validate again and save it back. Okay, sometimes it'll show the impacted sessions like this. Just disconnect and reconnect to refresh the complete metadata. That's it. Now we have the SP drop indexes, which is fine. So now I need to define the parameter file for it. So how would I define the parameter file? Either you can use WinSCP to do that. So just log into WinSCP and here enter the host name as 192.168.1.81 and enter the host name as student and the password whatever is provided to you. So just log in. Now I'm going to define a parameter file. So you should understand what is a way to define a parameter file here. So just go to this root and then U01 and app info, let's say server info shade and then the source files whatever you have. So here I'll define a parameter file for my defining the table name and then pass it. So let me define one file. Let's say I call this file as maybe so what can we call it? Is actually the folder name or okay. It's anyway what name we can give. EDW util package stored procedure. some name I'll give it. So dot PRM. So since I'm defining for this April batch, so probably I'll give it as April 9:30 p.m. EST dot PRM. See, dot PRM is a general practice or a general extension that we follow for a parameter files to understand. So just give it as a dot PRM. So since we are defining a parameter at the session level, so you need to copy the session name. So just copy the session name from this and keep that session name in the square brackets. Whenever you're defining the parameter file, you need to do that like this way. And whatever the parameters that you have, you need to define one by one. Now I need to go and pick up the actual parameter file name, I mean actual mapping parameters. So what is my parameter name? Dollar dollar tab name. So here I'll pass the dollar dollar tab name. So when you use a dollar dollar tab name and then pass it, let's say you're passing the ODS underscore employee as my input. I'm just initializing it. I'm initializing it in the parameter file. So just save it. All right. And now let's go and then define that parameter file. You need to provide the path and the parameter file. What is the path, and then the whatever the parameter file name that you have, you need to pass it. So this is my path for a parameter file. Where do you define a path? So you go here and then the pass the parameter file name here slash what is a parameter file name. So it's basically edw something, right? So let me go here and copy my file name. So this is my file name. So just copy this file name and now keep it. See where I'm actually passing the parameter file name. You go to the properties tab and enter that parameter file name, whatever it is. So if you define it like this, what will happen at the runtime? So basically at the runtime when you execute the stored procedure, your integration service will go and open that parameter file, read the table name, and at the runtime it will replace that dollar dollar tab name wherever it is used. It will replace that tab name with a ODS underscore employee. See, ODS underscore employee is having a primary key index. So in case if it returns an error, my stored procedure should fail. Basically my session should fail. So now when I run for a first time, my procedure should fail with the error saying that cannot drop the index enforcement of the primary key. So there is a very important option which you have to remember. This is the option when you go to the config object and the error handling, there is an option called as stop on errors. If you actually define this as 0, what will happen is that even though there are errors in your session, it will never stop it. It will continue to execute with the further input rows. If you actually keep this as a 1, what does that mean is it will actually stop your session on the first error and it will start processing of the next records, next source records. So this should be set to 1, which means it is stopping on the first error. Now I defined it. So remember even this value also. Stop on errors. What is the use of stop on errors property? So it should always be set to 1. Now when I run it, definitely I cannot drop the index on the ODS underscore employee table because it is having a primary key. So let me go here. Okay, one more thing. Yeah. So if you go and check the ODS underscore employee table, it's actually there in my target schema. ODS underscore employee. I have a primary key basically. See, if you have a primary key, you cannot drop the index, which is defined for a primary key. And one more thing, important thing that we have missed here is you haven't provided the connection for a stored procedure. So you need to define the stored procedure connection. So when I go to mapping, so this is anyway OLTP source. It's just a dual table. It can be accessed from anywhere. And stored procedure indexes, yes, you need to provide a connection for this. So my stored procedure is there in the target schema. All right. So now if I go here, basically my target schema, it is there in the target underscore Karthik. So just use it. So just apply now, click on OK. Save it now. When I run it, since we are passing the table name as a ODS employee, it should fail my session. Let's see that whether it will fail or not. Run the workflow and go here. This is your working folder. So get the previous runs. So this is failed. So if you see, my stored procedure is failed, saying this is error. See the error? Stored procedure has returned an error, cannot drop the index used for the enforcement of unique or a primary key. Means when I'm actually passed the ODS underscore employee as a table name, my stored procedure is returning an error, and that error is printing as part of my message. That is what is my requirement. If a stored procedure is returns an error, it has to fail the session. See, if it is not failing the session, you'll not be able to know whether your stored procedure has successfully completed or whether it has returned an error unless you go and check your parameter, I mean a target file. So that is the reason we have used the error function here. This error function will make sure that it is whenever it returns any error, it is actually stopping. I mean, it is stopping your session. Now, if you go and check how your source qualifier query has modified, if you go and check, see here, this is what is a parameter. So you're actually passing the parameter value as ODS underscore employee. It is picking it up from the parameter file. We are passing that, and you go and look at the source qualifier query, how it is modified. Okay. So when you go here, this is what is my source qualifier query. See here, we have written it as select $tab underscore name from dual. So your $tab name is replaced by the ODS underscore employee at the runtime. So whatever the input that you pass as an input from the parameter file, that will be replaced at the runtime. So this is the way of passing the input dynamically at the runtime. You're passing the input at the runtime. It's not, you're not hard coding it anywhere. So this is the advantage of the parameter. So whenever, if you don't want to hard code the values at the mapping level or something, you can always consider them as a parameter and pass that parameter as a parameter file. So now, in order to verify whether it is working fine or not, now what I'll do is I'll try to give you, I mean, we'll try to drop the indexes for a fact sales. Let me check whether we have any indexes for a, to just to verify whether my procedure is working fine or not. I'll pass the some other table name as an input and see whether it is able to drop the index or not. Now, yes, there are indexes which are there on my fact sales table. So what should happen now if I pass the sorry fact sales table name as an input? It should drop all these indexes in my stored procedure. All right. What I'll do this time now, let me go and edit this parameter file. Earlier for a previous run, we passed this as an ODS employee. Now I'm just changing this and replacing that by the fact sales. I'm just replacing that by the fact sales. So just save it and just change it. So just change, we have changed the parameter. Now when I rerun this job, which table name will be passed as an input? Fact underscore sales will be passed as an input. So just restart the workflow and succeeded. So just get run properties. So now it is succeeded. So this is not something that which we wanted. I want to check whether it has actually dropped my indexes or not on the fact sales. So now it has dropped the indexes. So this is how you actually invoke a stored procedure from Informatica using the stored procedure transformation. So this is called as a connected way of stored procedure. How to use an unconnected method. So I'll show you that as well, how to use an unconnected method. So it's just a pretty easy, just like your lookup. When you want to call an unconnected stored procedure, basically you need to use :sp dot, you need to pass the stored procedure transformation name and then pass all the inputs. Suppose if your stored procedure is taking table name as an input, so just pass the table name. And if it is returning any error message, you need to always catch that by using a pseudo column called as a proc result. So whatever the error message it is returning, it will catch that value into the proc result, and this can be invoked either by using a variable port or by using a output port. So now I'll define something called as a v underscore error message, which is equal to like this. So whenever the proc result catches the error message, that error message will be assigned back to your v underscore error message. So let me just show you quickly. So how we can configure the unconnected. So I don't want to disturb this, so I'm copying this. So let me use it as reusable unconnected. And how can we call this stored procedure is that, so just remove this one and remove this one as well. Now this is actually the stored procedure is taking one table name as an input and then returning me the error message. So what I'll do is here we'll use one more expression. You don't need to, because you already have an expression here. So always the unconnected will be called from this. So just push it up. Now you have the table name. So I need to call that as part of this error message. So let's say I'll call this as v underscore error message, and I'm changing it to variable port. So I'm just changing this to variable port. So this is going to be an input. Now here I'll call that unconnected stored procedure colon sp dot. You need to give the stored procedure transformation name. What is your stored procedure transformation name? Sp underscore drop indexes. And what is the input it is taking? It is taking the table name as an input. So this is a table name which is coming from my source. Just pass that, and it is catching the it is returning the error message that you have it as a use it as a proc result. So this value, whatever it is caught onto proc result, it will assign back to your error message. So whenever your error message is not null, then it will go and print the message as part of it. So just apply and click on OK. So this is what is your unconnected stored procedure transformation, which it is there. You can configure it in this way. So this is pretty much about the unconnected stored procedure and the connected stored procedure. Is it a passive transformation or an active transformation? Is the stored procedure is a passive or an active? All right, so the stored procedure is actually a passive transformation. See, if you're actually passing some 100 tables as an input, it will execute for 100 times and will give you the same amount of rows as an output. All right, so it will give you the same amount of rows as an output, and then it will define that. So this is more about the it is like a passive transformation. And there is another thing, you can also configure the procedure in a different ways. Okay, stored procedure can be executed in 5 different ways. One is a normal means, whenever you pass the input, it will execute it. So whenever you pass the input, it will execute it. And it can also be configured in a different way. So let's say something called as a target preload and target post load, and sorry, it's not part load, it's actually the post load. Post load, and you have the source preload, source post load. These are all the different ways of defining the stored procedure. You can also define it in the normal mode. Then what is the use? Why do we need to trigger the stored procedure for preload and all? See, whenever you are actually having a drop indexes mechanism for a particular fact table, you can always configure the stored procedure in the same mapping as a target preload. So which means you can basically just assign the value like this and use the call statement. You need to call that stored procedure, whatever it is. So this is your stored procedure name, and pass the input and everything. So whatever the input that it is receiving, so just pass this input and then do that. So if you want to call that based on the target preload and post load, you should always use this call text. Why we are using a call text is because if you want to invoke PL SQL stored procedures or any other thing, call is a syntax to call that, syntax to invoke it. So you just pass the table name here and then the error message. So you can just configure it like this. So target preload is for dropping the indexes we'll use, and target post load is for creating the indexes, source preload is for creating, and source post load is for dropping the indexes. So this is like at the source level. So this is for creating the indexes, and source post load is actually for dropping the indexes, and target post load is for creating indexes. It is a target database. Source is for a source database, target is for a target database. Target preload is for dropping the indexes. So this is what we use a different ways of triggering the stored procedure. I This is one method to define or invoke the stored procedure transformation using it. So what we have done is we have understand so many things in this example. We understand how to define a parameter file and pass the value at the runtime, and we have seen how to use a stored procedure transformation, and we have seen how to create a shortcut for a mapping. All right, so these are all the things that we have seen, and we did also understand what is the use of error function and what is the use of abort function. So this is more or less about your stored procedure transformation, how it can be used. So the way how you have created a procedure for drop indexes, you can also create the procedures for create indexes. Mappings to invoke the create indexes procedure, and mappings to invoke the analyze table stored procedure as well. So we have defined the other two as well. If you remember, in the stored procedure transformation, in the package, I also defined the drop indexes as well as analyze tables and all those things. So definitely you can even call that as well. So I'm giving this as a homework basically for create index and analyze table. Also you create a separate mappings, and then try to test whether you're able to create the indexes or not. Okay, so that's pretty much is about the drop indexes procedure. All right, any questions before we proceed with the next one?
Karthik, Suresh here.
Yes, go ahead please.
Karthik, in real time, we use store process only for the maintenance activities, or is there anywhere we use for update? In regular programming language, we use it for update and insert. So in
It
that
depends
scenarios, we'll use.
actually from scenario to scenario. Well, most of the cases
Uh,
we don't define for a DML operations because it's your
okay.
Informatica is already doing the same thing. So why not your stored
Yes.
procedure? So when you have some kind of a performance issues, let's say when I'm actually doing it from Informatica, my updates are running very slow. And rather, if I'm actually pushing that logic to back to my database, so if you feel that any kind of a bulk insert, if you want to do, or these kind of a thing, then we'll write a stored procedure and invoke it. Most of the cases, we'll avoid it.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Right. Any other questions from anyone, please? All right. So hope everybody is following. I don't want to burden you with some more things for the today. You can probably drop off for the day, and tomorrow we'll meet again with. I'll try to show you how to invoke this create index and the analyze tables also. We'll just quickly create them and then move on with the slowly changing dimension tables. So tomorrow we are going to start with how to implement the SEDs if the time permits. So brush up yourself. What is an SED type 1, SED type 2, and SED type 3? So we'll understand this. What is this? So today we talked about the stored procedure transformation. Where is it? So invoking a stored procedure using this. This is what we understand today. All right. Okay, how many sessions are still remaining? So it will go for 10 more sessions probably. Mostly 10 sessions. So 10 hours training is still left. So we'll probably pick up the better pace once we complete the slowly changing dimensions, because that is so important. And once that is done, you can probably go for a longer, go at a faster pace, because you should have got already the comfort by this time, how to use a tool and how to start using it. So there are some important concepts still we are left with. So yeah, it'll go for 10 sessions minimum more than 10 sessions. Yes. All right. So that's it. I have. Thanks. We'll see the
Yes,
tomorrow.
welcome.
Yeah. See, some people actually, I see them logging at 7 o'clock. I hope you have received the communication that we have actually shifted or preponed the class by half an hour. And I hope everybody has got that. In case if somebody has not received the information, I'm again repeating the class is actually starting at 9 p.m. EST and 6:30 a.m. IST in the morning. All right. Thank you.